Hello everyone, welcome to SmartBear Academy, LoadComplete 201. We are going to dive right in and get started. For the attendees that have joined us, if you could just let us know into the questions pane, questions chat pane, that you can hear us okay. We would appreciate it. Let's get a confirmation that our audio is working, and then we will get started. Just let us know that you can hear us. Perfect. All right. So, thank you everyone for joining. We are going to get started with a couple housekeeping items, and then I will hand it over to Mike Punksky to start with the training. For a couple announcements for those of you that may or may not know, we are hosting our first SmartBear user conference, SmartBear Connect. It's going to be September 12th to the 13th. The first day is going to be offering live interactive product training classes, and day 2 is going to be featuring different industry experts and product insight speakers and panelists. I will put the link into the GoToWebinar pane so you can learn more about what will be happening at the SmartBear Connect in September. And for this class, there's a handout available, so feel free to download it. It has information on the consulting services, load testing that Mike offers through the FTL. There's information for the support hub, for LoadComplete, the link for registration for future classes. This is our 201 class. We do have a 301 class next month, so that information is in the handout for you. And we'd love to make this class as interactive as possible, so just add your questions into the questions pane. And when you do exit out of the GoToWebinar, if you take a moment to fill out our exit survey, we would appreciate it. It has some questions just to give us a rating of the class and give us some future topic ideas for you, our users and customers. We want to customize these for you. And for the training progression for LoadComplete, this is our 201 class, part of our advanced classes. So we host our 101, 201, and 301 in order each quarter. And at the end of all 3 classes, you will receive a graduate certificate for attending 101, 201, and 301. And then we do offer the premium training from Mike at FTL Metrics. There's different things of load and performance testing, mentoring, also alert site consulting services. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Mike directly after this or to us at customers@smartbear.com. Myself, Dana Rogozensky, here from Somerville, Mass. at our SmartBear headquarters. And we have Mike Punksky, our expert load tester from FTL Metrics down in Florida, that is going to dive into the agenda and then get right into the tool and get started. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to unmute you. There you go, Mike.
Okay, so do I have the screen?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am, as Dana said, Mike Punksky, and I have a company that is involved in performance testing and performance monitoring. And I have a lot of experience with SmartBear and with LoadComplete in particular. Today's agenda is that we want to go over why we want to verify a recorded scenario, what the purpose is, how we do that. We want to talk about customizing your recorded scenario, and then we want to talk about using RAS, which is a remote agent service in the cloud and in the local network. So this will give you a really good idea. Number one, what you can do after you record your scenario to make it better fit your needs. It will give you a good idea of what you can do with your scenario, both from the perspective of getting the information that you're looking for, as well as doing some things to make it easier for somebody else looking at your scenario to understand what you did. We're not always the only person working on a particular project, and it's good to be able to have others know exactly what you did if they have to jump in the middle, especially. Then I want to talk about, like I said, doing remote agent in the cloud and in the local network, because as we're aware, you can a lot of times get a lot more information by testing from the outside in. With the tool itself out of the box, it's very simple to go in and run a test from inside your network, but that may not give you all the information that you're looking for. And we want to make sure that all the questions that you have get answered. So, jumping down to the next slide, we have why we want to verify a recorded scenario. When you record a scenario in LoadComplete is much the same as a script in a lot of other tools, except you don't do any programming. Your script is recorded for you, and all of the programming is done by LoadComplete itself. Once you have recorded your scenario, the reason that you want to verify it is to make sure that your script actually works. A lot of times there may be something about your application that the tool has a problem with, or something may have happened while you were doing the recording that would cause it to not work. Excuse me, 1 second. I'll just shut that off. Okay, sorry about that. And so you want to make sure that your scenario is going to work. And the best way to do that is the verification process that I'll explain to you. What that does is it takes a single virtual user, and that single virtual user will run your scenario a single time. And you know, as you can well imagine, if you wanted to run a test with 2,000 users and it doesn't work with one user, then there's a problem. So you definitely want to go in and do that. The easiest way to do that, I can show it to you right now. Here is LoadComplete, and I've already gone in this morning and created a very simple scenario, and I'll expand it out. You can see that it's a little bit more than what you see here on the screen. And so you've created your scenario. What you want to do every time, right after recording it, is come in here, right-click on your scenario, and say verify. This next screen that comes up, I think this is fantastic because this didn't exist in the past with LoadComplete, and this makes it a lot easier for you to get your information right away. When you're recording a scenario, the tool will record the think times or the pauses, the human pauses that you had in between steps. So if you were recording a scenario and you went, let's say, to the home page, then you decided to click on the blog, and then you decided to click on contact us. But let's say while you were recording, you got to the home page and you got a telephone call. So you went to your telephone call and talked to somebody for a few minutes, came back, and then clicked to go to blog, contact us, and you were done. You now have a huge pause of think time in the middle of your scenario. When you verify it, that pause was still in there. So you want to make sure that you get your information right away. This screen enables you to either use the think time values that were recorded or ignore them just for this verification. So I would always click to ignore them. By clicking there, it gets up, it's running a single user, a single time. Goes to the website, hits that first page. These dark lines over here are the individual pages, so that's 2 of them. It got to the 3rd one, it ended, and it worked. So we know that our scenario passed the verification and it works with a single user. That does not mean that it's going to work with 10 or 100 or 2,000, but at least you know the logic is correct. There may be some concurrency issues at a higher level, and I personally, rather than just run that single verification, will go in a lot of times and create a test to do the same thing with multiple users, even if it's just a small number, like let's say 5, just to make sure that any concurrency issues get weeded out as well. Here, I'll just run this for 2 minutes, and make sure you have continuous load selected. I'll use the think time that's defined in the scenario, and then I'll just run that. So here we are doing the same thing, but we're doing it with 5 users, and it looks like everything is working just as well with 5 as it did with 1. So that's all good. You can see that here we go. Now we can either just let this run or end it early. I think we've shown that everything is working. You can see from the page loads over here that multiple users are going through and clicking on the pages and getting them to load. So that's all good. We can just go up and click stop. You can end that, create a test, and of course we get a warning saying that this was ended manually. If I take a look at that, execution was terminated by the user. So other than that, it would have been 100% green. One last thing to point out while we're here is if we go up to our scenario, you'll notice that these names exist for the pages: homepage, blog, and contact us. When I recorded this scenario, those were not the names that were put on the pages. What LoadComplete does by default, if you don't have a name that you put on the page, is that it will create a name either based on something that it gets from the title or something that it gets from the URL string itself. So it's always a good idea to come back in here afterwards. You can click on the page name and make it something that makes more sense to you. You can change the name completely, you can add spaces, you can do what you want, but make it so that it's easily readable and you know what's going on there. The other thing to bear in mind is, once again, think time. So if after you record your scenario, you look in here and you see that your think time is extreme, I always set think time for the first page to 0, because you really don't think before you arrive at the site. When you arrive at the site, that is the beginning of your script. So I have 0 think time there, and I'll add in something like 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds for think time. Depending on what you're doing, you may want to increase that think time to something that's more reasonable. If you have a form, for example, and there are 12 fields that you need to fill out, including credit card information, dates, and codes, you may want to increase that to a minute or 2. Sometimes a person has to get up and get their wallet so that they can put the information in, and they have to go look for their wallet because they're not carrying it with them. So you want to put in something here that's reasonable for what you're doing. Blog and contact us was very simple, and I think most users would have clicked through at the 2-second point. So that's all good. Now, what I'll do is go back in and slide. Here we go. So we talked about page names and we talked about think times. The other thing that I want to discuss is LoadComplete operators. And you can see down here, we have the operation repository. We also have the host list. So there are 2 tabs here, and yours may, by default, may be on host list. So you may want to go back in and click on the operation repository to see this. This is something that's relatively new to LoadComplete. In the past, your scenario would run as it was recorded, and you sort of had to go with that. If you decided that you wanted to do page 1, page 2, page 3, and then page 4, you wanted to load 30 times before going to page 4, or maybe 5, you could not do that. Now you can. So we have what are called LoadComplete operators, and they're sitting here under the operation repository, and they do some really cool things for you. You can insert a stop. It's depending on certain conditions, you may want your script to stop or scenario. You may want to put a while loop in. While a certain value is greater than 5, continue, and it will loop through until you reach that value reaches that certain value. You can have a variable value set here in this operator that you can insert into your scenario. You can group things for better readability. You can create a rendezvous point. What a rendezvous point is normally when you run a load test, you stagger your virtual users. You don't want everybody starting at the same time and going through the application in lockstep. That creates artificial bottlenecks. On your actual website, you're not going to have 2,000 people all click the submit button to log in at the exact same moment. If you have 2,000 people on your site, they're all going to be doing different things at different times. But there may be times when you want to test that login function, for example, and you want all of them to do it at the exact same moment just to see what would happen. Or you may have some search functionality that you want to test, and you want to see what happens when a very large number of users do that all at the exact same time. So what a rendezvous point is you can set that to a certain point in your scenario. Let's say you set it here right after this request, then all of your users will still be staggered, but when they get to this point, they'll stop progressing and wait until they're all at that same point, and then they will continue as one. And that's a way that you can test functions within your application. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't see it used as often as some of the other operators, but it can be important when you need that information. You can insert delays. You can even call another scenario. What's really good about that is you can create a scenario that just does the login. If you're testing one application and the login is always the same set of steps, you may want to create a scenario that just does the login, and then in any other scenario that you create, you can call that scenario at the top. It will do the login and then continue on. The value to that is if something changes. I have a customer, for example, that has a 3-step login process. You enter user ID, which is actually a telephone number. Then you enter a secret, which is a secret value, and then you enter the password. So it's 3 steps. But from time to time, especially during certain maintenance windows, they play around with their login process, and sometimes the secret is not asked for. Other times, the password gets asked for before the secret. So in a scenario where you have that set to one scenario that does the login, it's very easy to go in and make the changes to that one scenario, and then all of your other scenarios will be working correctly because they're calling the changed code. Change in one place and have it affect as many others as is necessary. So that is something that can be very important for you. Now I'll step back out again. So the next thing is configuring RAS in the cloud. There are a number of ways that you can run LoadComplete. LoadComplete can run 100% from the controller, and the controller is the software that you install, the actual LoadComplete software. You can install it on a laptop, you can install it on a server, it can even be installed on a virtual machine. There are some licensing requirements if it's installed on a VM that are a little bit different, and you might need to look at that. But you can install it in all of those places. And you can run a load test from LoadComplete, like we just did. But there are going to be times when you want to test from the outside in. So let's say you want to test from the West Coast of the United States or the East Coast of the United States, or you want to test from Europe. You can do all of that by doing them from the cloud. Additionally, you're able to test from other local machines. So if you want to run a very large number of virtual users, you can't run, let's say, 10,000 users all from a single machine. It would overwhelm that single machine, and then your PC, server, or laptop would become the bottleneck, not the application. Your application might also be the bottleneck at 10,000, but definitely the load testing machine would be as well. So what you want to do is either test from the cloud or test from other machines. Personally, if I can get away with it, I'd always prefer to test from the cloud because the process is much, let's say, more elemental and easy than testing it from local machines. There's less configuration that you have to do. So the requirements to be able to test from the cloud is your local computer needs to have Microsoft's .NET framework version 3.5 or later installed. And in any current operating system of Microsoft, that's going to be the case. If you have a much older machine, you may need to verify that you have that installed. And then you need to have an Amazon Web Services account. These are very cheap or even free. So if you go to Amazon and look at getting an account, there is a free tier, and I would definitely recommend getting that in order to be able to run some tests from outside. It's very, very simple to do. And if you have your tests, if you're not running very, very large tests, you can get away with running that for a long period of time. I ran my consulting business using an Amazon free tier account for a year. And I had tests, of course, that exceeded the limits of that, and I got charged a little bit. But overall, you'll save some money going with a free account. And you can do that, like I said, for a year. There are additional documents that are in the help file with LoadComplete that will give you a lot of additional information about setting it up. One thing that SmartBear recommends is that you use a virtual private cloud for your testing. You don't have to. It's just something that will be a best practice for you. It's very, very simple to do. You want to make sure that your machine meets the system requirements and that you're able to do the bare minimum to be able to get this done. A lot of your processing is going to be done out on the cloud. So you want to make sure that you at least meet the minimum requirements. Like I said, a lot of processing is not going to be happening on your machine. But you will be doing things like controlling those load instances that are out there, and you're going to be generating reports. The recommended instance types, you're going to be given a default instance. You know, you don't need to, in most cases, you're not going to want to select very large instance types with 16 CPUs, you know, hundreds of gigs of RAM. You have a lot of options, but the defaults will serve you very well. And then also when you're setting it up to run in the cloud, there's a little calculator that's built into LoadComplete that's going to give you an estimated cloud test price. So, you know, if you were running a test of, let's say, 1,000 users for a half hour, it might cost you $1 or $2 or $3, something very, very cheap to run that test. And I want to show you very quickly just how you set that up. If you come here to cloud, you come in and say add an Amazon image, and what you need are two things. I don't have a key set up for this one today, but what you would do is when you get your Amazon account, you're given two keys. You have an access key and you have a secret access key. And those keys look something like this. They're long strings of numbers and characters and some special characters. And then the same thing would be true for the secret access key. When you put those in here, they're configured for your account. And then when you come in, you can click on what region you want to use. You can choose the network, either EC2 Classic or a virtual private network that you've set up. You can pick the region and the zone. Like I said, so the region, let's say you pick Virginia, which is US East 1. You can have 1A, 1B, 1C, and these are different data centers in that region. And then you have your image, which is the SmartBear LoadComplete remote agent image. That you don't need to change at all. And like I said, you're able to choose a bunch of different machine types. C3 large, C2 small. You can pick the size of the hard disk, the amount of RAM, and the number of CPUs. And there are different charges associated with these, so you can pick the one that best suits your needs. If you're running a very, very large test, it may behoove you to have larger instances. And then it's going to tell you what the maximum virtual user number is based on the size of the instance. And that's it. What you will find out, and I'll change the name of this to My Cloud. What you're going to do to run it from the cloud, very simply, if I go down to my test, you're going to see right now this test is set up to run 5 virtual users. It's that same extra validation run that we ran. It's running scenario 1, which is our scenario, and it's running it from master. Master is the name for the controller, and that is this machine where LoadComplete is installed. But now that we've created a cloud instance, you have the ability to come down here and select that instead. And when you do that, when you start up your test, instead of running it from your local machine, it's going to start a remote agent instance on the cloud and run the test from there. Everything else is going to appear the same to you. And the best part about running it from the cloud is a lot of the configuration, like I said, is done for you. If I'm going to run, let's say, a 10,000 user test, LoadComplete will figure out how many instances you need to start in the cloud, and it will start those up. It will also tell you what the price is going to be. Let's say you needed to start 20 instances on the cloud. It's going to tell you what the price is going to be to run those 20 instances for the duration of your test. So it's like I said, very cheap and getting cheaper. all the time, every time I run a test, I'm just surprised at how much the price goes down for EC2. And it was much more expensive back when they were one of the only games in town, but these days so many others are doing it that the price keeps dropping. That's all there is to it. I mean, you come in here, you run your test, and it will run from the cloud. At the end of the test, it will grab the results from those instances and create your report. So that's good. Now, if you are going to do that from local machines, it's a little bit different. So, the other thing I want to point out is, this is just my own little paranoia, is I like to just make sure I go into my Amazon account after running a test just to make sure that all of the instances have indeed shut down. And you can see if any of them are still running, and you can stop them. And I have not had a problem with LoadComplete shutting down instances. On some other load test tools that I've used, there have been times where if the test ended a little abruptly for some reason, or there was a crash, you might leave an instance running. And if you leave that instance running, you're being charged. Not very much, but very little. And over time, that could add up. So I always like to go in and make sure that all the instances are terminated. Then let's take a look at, let's come back here and talk about putting it on a local machine. So local RAS ships with the software. So when you get the software, you're going to have LoadComplete and you're going to have LoadComplete RAS. The minimum system requirements, they're not that high. I mean, they're looking for a Core 2 Duo, 2 gigahertz or higher, 4 gig of RAM, and 30 megs of disk space. And that's the minimum. Recommended, of course, is much higher. You'd want to have an i7 with 4 or more cores, 16 gig of RAM. And both 32-bit and 64 bits are supported. And you can use Windows 10, 8, 8.1, Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2012, and Windows Server 2008. You want to make sure that your remote workstations have network access to your controller or master station. And then also, if you use a firewall, make sure that the remote agent is allowed through it. To be able to interact with LoadComplete and to simulate virtual users, the remote agent utility uses ports from the range 55937 to 65535. Now that seems like a pretty large range, but what happens is for every certain number of users, it creates a different port. So you might have a large number of ports being used from a single test. So those numbers, once again, are 55937 to 65535. And the actual numbers are that it uses one port for every 100 simulated virtual users. If one of the ports in that range is not available for some reason, the remote agent skips it and uses the next available port. Also, you need certain permissions. So you must have administrator permissions on the workstation where you install LoadComplete Remote Agent, and make sure that you're logged in as an administrator or a member of the administrators group on that workstation. To use Remote Agent, administrator permissions are not required. So you just need administrator privileges to start it up and install it. The other thing to be very aware of is we recommend that you use the remote agent version and build that matches your LoadComplete version. If you upgrade LoadComplete from version 4.1 to 4.2, for example, you're going to want to install the remote agent version that matches on those machines that you would use. And so what we're talking about doing here is you can use one machine that you installed LoadComplete on, and you can sort of create robots or remote agents that are in your network that can generate the load for you. I think a best practice is to generate no load from your controller. Let the controller control and be in charge of creating reports and monitoring the status of those agents, but let the agents themselves be the ones in charge of creating the load and then sending it back to the controller. So if you don't have the remote agent software and you do want to install it, you can log into your my.smartbear.com account and navigate to the LoadComplete 4 page, and then you can click on the link to download the remote agent service. If you have a trial license of LoadComplete, you can download the remote agent from this web page, and then there's a web page that we can give you access to that is support.smartbear.com/downloads/LoadComplete, all one word. Okay. When you install RAS, you're going to install it and then wait until just put the installation on, run it as you would any other setup. Wait till all the required files are extracted. There's an installation wizard that's going to guide you through the installation process, and the remote agent will be installed as a service on that machine. So what this does for you is if you're kind of tight on machines, you have the ability to install it on your coworkers' PCs, of course, with their permission. And if you needed to run that test, you can use their machines to generate the load. Since it's a service, it's going to be a little bit less intrusive than starting up something on their machines that's going to take over their screen. It will, however, you would want people to not be doing other things on those machines while it's running, because that could affect your test. So it's always better to use dedicated machines if you have those available. And the same thing, you want to make sure that you have all your requirements met, and you want to make sure that everything matches up, like I said again, and everything just works. It's great. Once you've installed local RAS, then that will show up in your drop-down list as well, and you can select it. Now, the difference is going to be that if you set up a test using local machines, you're going to have to tell each instance here how many virtual users to run. With the cloud, I can, for example, say, I want to run 2,000 users, and when I run it, it's going to start up the right number of instances. If I was going to do this with a local RAS, I might have to say, okay, I'm going to run 400 from that machine, and then right-click here, add a new item, and run 400 from another machine. So you would configure each individual instance. So you can see why I prefer to run this from the cloud. And that's it, it works. you don't have to go through the same sort of configuration that you did when you set up a cloud instance. So you're not worried about any of these things. You're going to be just putting on a local machine, and there is no additional security that has to be adhered to make that work. The other thing you can do, like I said, not a best practice, but you can use your local machine as one of the workstations. You can use a cloud, and you could use an RAS instance. You can mix and match and have lots of instances running your load. The other thing that I want to point out while we're in here is that you have the ability to run multiple scenarios. Let's say we had test one, here's test one right here, and we wanted to run multiple scenarios. Let's say we had one scenario that went to the home page, and that was it. Just loaded the home page, because as you can be, as you're probably aware, a lot of users will go to a home page for a site and then move on to go somewhere else after they've read something on it. So you may want to have one scenario that just goes to that page. You may have one that goes to the home page and then does a number of other functions. You may have one that goes all the way through and does a checkout, puts something into the cart and checks out. So you may have 3 different scenarios or more that you want to run, and you can run those from a single test. So you can have scenario 1 running with this one, scenario 2 running here, and scenario 3 running with another group. Each one of these can be configured separately, and you can have, like I said, multiple scenarios. You can also create multiple tests, but you can only run one test at a time. So let's say you had one test that just ran scenario 1. You could have another test that runs scenario 1, 2, and 3. Whatever you want to do, you can set these things up to do whatever is necessary to test your application. And then when you're done, you just get your report and move on to the next test. So really, there's not much more to running this. It's like I said, a good idea if you're going to be running this from Amazon to at least investigate getting a free account and setting that up. You just have to remember to use your license keys and always keep your keys in a very safe place. And that's it. So this is all it was here. Let's see if we have anything left to go through. Nope. That is the end. So I guess it's now we're going to open the floor to questions. And
yeah, please, anyone who has, thank you, Mike, that was great. Anyone that has any questions for Mike on what was covered, going through on the LoadComplete topics, send them into the chat box, and we will get to them live for you. Not seeing any come through, Mike.
I see that there were some questions posted.
Yeah, they were taken care of. I got them.
Okay. But nothing in chat.
Nope. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions coming through, and anyone that does have any that come after the fact, one thing you can do if you'd like to receive a copy of this recording, email us for requesting it at customers@smartbear.com. And if you have any additional questions that come up after you've watched the replay, feel free to reach out to customers. I'll forward it over to Mike. Mike, if you want to put your contact information, oh, it's right there on the main page. Never mind.
Yeah.
There, so you have his email and the website for FTL Metrics. Reach out to him direct as well. So thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining our LoadComplete 201. We have LoadComplete 301 on August 17th. Look forward to having you guys join us there, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.